If we want to take a step back in time, the year is 2023, not that long ago. But in 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General released an advisory report that was titled, "Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation." This is an 82-page report. It's really not a fun read. Don't really recommend it to you guys. But if you read it, you'll see that it details a lot of different research that shows a decrease in connections and an increase in loneliness and isolation amongst Americans. And they talk about all of the negative effects and impacts that that has on us. And they go back even before the COVID-19 pandemic, which accelerated some of this stuff. But one of the things that stood out to me was this. In 2021, 49% of Americans, so roughly half of Americans, reported that they have 3 or fewer close friends. If you go back to 1990, the number of Americans that would say that is only about 27%. That is kind of a drastic increase in not that much time of people saying, I don't have that many close friends anymore. But what stood out to me the most from this report was this quote: "Loneliness is far more than just a bad feeling. It harms both the individual and societal health. It is associated with greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. The mortality impact of being socially disconnected is similar to that caused by smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, and even greater than that associated with obesity and physical inactivity." Now, some of you guys might read or hear that, and you might have the same kind of shock that I had the first time. I had to reread this 4 or 5 times just to make sure, okay, am I understanding what this is actually saying? Do I understand, am I reading this right, or is my brain being dumb right now and putting words in different orders? See, we hear a lot, or at least we have recently, about how bad cigarettes can be for you and how important it is to take care of yourself physically and to be in shape, to eat healthy. But we don't hear nearly as much about loneliness or the importance of being connected, to being with others. In this report, it goes on to outline and detail some different pillars, as they called them, that are necessary to increase the social connectedness, to try and reverse this trend that we're seeing. And it's not just the U.S. either that is noticing this. If you go back to 2018, the United Kingdom, they made many headlines, most of them very satirical. They were being made fun of. People were ridiculing them, thinking it's ridiculous, because they appointed someone to the position of Minister of Loneliness. The goal of that position was simply to create a plan, a strategic plan to combat loneliness and increase connectedness. Because like the Surgeon General, they saw the negative effects that was happening. They saw that this was not good and they needed to do something about it. And Japan has since followed suit, also appointing a Minister of Loneliness. This is very similar to the famous quote by John Donne, written all the way back in 1624. He wrote, "No man is an island." If we look at more of the context of this, he said that no man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. He's saying that no man's an island. No man stands entirely alone. We're all a part of something bigger. We need the people around us. And the people around us, they need us as well. And what we see here is that the Surgeon General, the United Kingdom, Japan, John Donne, they all have realized something that deep down a lot of us really know too. That we need connections and relationships with others. We need to be in community with other people. But they weren't the first ones to realize this and to point this out. We could keep going, finding older and older and older examples, pointing to people further back in time who pointed out the same thing. They said, hey, loneliness is a problem. We are designed for connection and we need to do that. But the very first time this gets pointed out, so if we go all the way back to the creation account, Genesis 2:18, God said, "It's not good for man to be alone." That's the very first time that it's pointed out that loneliness is bad. It's the only thing in creation that God says is not good, so that man is alone. And this is a really weird thing for us to think about, because when you think about Adam in the garden, was he really alone? I mean, he was there walking with God. He was physically present with God in the garden. And then you have all of the animals there as well. All of this is happening. And yet God still says that he's alone. God still says that he needed somebody else. He needed somebody that was like him. He needed another human there. So God made Eve to fix that problem, to be there and allow for Adam to be in relationship with somebody else. This need is something that is baked into us from the very beginning of both humanity and just the very beginning of our own lives. As Kurt Thompson put it in his book, The Soul of Shame, we are born into the world looking for somebody, looking for us. And we remain in this mode of searching for the rest of our lives. Now, some of the best moments and some of my favorite moments in life recently have been when I'm just at home, I'm relaxed, laying in our recliner, and my 4-month-old son is taking a nap on me. It is a very peaceful and calm moment. I'm just like, this is great. Even when we are in a position that's not super comfortable for me, but he's super comfy, so it's great. It's a great time. And then he wakes up, and he starts frantically looking around like, where am I? What is happening? He's got these wide eyes. But that interruption becomes actually the sweetest moment when he looks up, and he sees me looking down at him, and I get just the biggest toothless grin ever. He is just so happy. He's like, I found my dad. He found someone that he is in relationship with that cares about him. And I didn't teach him to do this. I don't really know how I would teach a 4-month-old, hey, it's really cute when you look up at mom and dad and smile, so you need to do that more. Like, that wasn't something we tried to do. That's something that was built in, something that he just instinctively does. And this is a result of us being made in the image of God. God himself is 3 in 1, or a triune God, as he's sometimes called. He's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, 3 persons, 1 God. God has always existed and always will exist in a relationship with himself. We were created by a relational God for relationships. And that's why this is wired into us. That's why this need is felt so deeply for us to have others in our lives that we care about and love, and that care about and love us as well. Now, since this whole series is focusing on the life rhythms of Jesus, let's go ahead and turn to Mark chapter 1 in our Bibles. And we're going to look at just one of the examples of the way that Jesus lived this community in his life. So, Mark chapter 1, we're going to read verses 16 through 20. And they say, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little further, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat, preparing their nets. Without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. Very early on in Jesus' earthly ministry, we see him calling his first disciples to him, to follow him. The implications of this are a little bit lost on us today in our Western culture. We're very individualistic, but they had a very different way of looking at this. And the original audience, they understood what was happening here. They understood this call that Jesus had for these people. When a rabbi, like Jesus, called someone to follow them back then, it didn't mean that that person simply learned about that person. Or maybe they got out their phone and hit follow on Instagram or whatever it is. It didn't mean that you just learned about them. Didn't mean that you just read about them or read the things that they wrote. It meant that you actually got to know that person. You followed them around everywhere they went. You learned from them. You grew in relationship with them and the other disciples that were in that community. If your rabbi went to a different town, you followed them there. You went to that town. If they went a couple blocks down the street, so did you. If they turned left, you turned left as well. You followed and did what your rabbi did. You followed them and you learned from them and you were changed by them so that you could eventually become like them. That is the goal of a disciple back then and the goal of a disciple today as well. And there's this Jewish blessing that says, may you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. And this sums up this idea perfectly. This blessing is saying that you should be following your rabbi so closely and imitating them so well that when they take a step and they kick up some dust from the ground, it should be getting on you. That is how close you should be to them. This is an entirely different kind of community than some of us are used to. This is the kind of community that requires a radical commitment. It's not always easy, but it is worth it. And this is what Jesus has called each and every single one of us to be a part of. He called these fishermen back then, and he's called you and me today. Community, it is so worth it, even when it's difficult. It might be a little challenging from time to time. But our communities, they can help us to keep on track, like Jesus did often with some of his disciples. And one of the best examples of this comes from Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Now this comes right after Peter confesses. He's like, "Hey, Jesus, I get it. You are the Messiah. You are the Son of God." Peter has this amazing moment and reveals this to him. And Jesus then tells the disciples about how he is going to be killed. And then Peter, as the NIV puts it, tries to rebuke Jesus. He pulls Jesus aside and goes, "Hey, Jesus, stop talking like that. Like, that's not what's going to happen. Stop being dumb." In this moment, Peter thinks he knows better than Jesus. He thinks he understands what the plan is better. Or maybe more realistically, Peter has his own plan, his own vision for what the future is supposed to look like, for what is going to happen, and doesn't involve Jesus being killed on a Roman cross. His plan for the future is very different from what Jesus's was. Now, this whole interaction probably wasn't a very fun moment for Peter or Jesus either. Like, none of us really like to be corrected. That's not a fun moment. And also, it can be awkward and difficult to try and correct somebody else. But it is a really important thing. Peter needed to be reminded in this moment that he was focusing on human concerns. He was focusing on things other than God. He wasn't looking at things with an eternal perspective. He was looking at things through his own earthly human eyes. And this is something that we easily get caught up in today. How often do we make a plan? We have our vision for the future. This is exactly how it's going to work. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to this school. I'm going to get this job. I'm going to get married. It's going to be great. Life is going to be perfect. But we fail to include God in this plan. Or maybe we just neglect to ask him to be a part of it because we don't have time. We're busy. Like, we'll include him later. Or we don't include those around us who love us and might point out some of these ways that we're being dumb. We're being like Peter. We're focusing on something other than the most important thing. And here we see Jesus in a loving but truthful way help to recenter Peter on what matters most. And that's something we all need. We need to be willing to be corrected. Like, it's great if you are willing to help correct somebody, but you also need to be willing to accept that from someone in your community. When they lovingly come to you and be like, "Hey, you're not focused on the right thing." Now, hopefully, they don't call you Satan in the process. That might get a little awkward. Or maybe it'd be funny and it would help you. I don't know. That's kind of up to you guys to figure out. But I think in this moment, when we look at what's happening and we think about all we know about Peter from the Gospels, this is probably exactly what he needed to hear. He probably needed something that sounds that drastic to help him realize you are not focused on what matters. You are being distracted. You are focused on humanly things, not on me. And so Jesus, he grabs his attention and he corrects him. And it's often easy for us when we read these things to look at Peter and be like, "Man, you're an idiot. Like, how could you not understand what Jesus was saying?" Like, we look down on Peter. But if we take a step back and we really think about it, we are a whole lot more like Peter than any of us care to admit. Like, I love reading the stories about Peter in the New Testament because I'm just like, yep, I can relate to that. Like, I can be impulsive. I can be dumb like that. I can have these moments where I get distracted by my own, like, selfish desires that I'm not thinking about Jesus. And that's why we need community. We need people who are going to help call us back to the thing that matters most, to help us focus on Jesus. And another great example of Jesus and this radical commitment to community that he has, it comes to us from the darkest moment in Jesus' life, the night that he is betrayed, and he is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he wants his friends to be there with him, to be praying for him and supporting him. So if we go to Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 45, we read this story. And it says, "Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, 'Sit here while I go over there and pray.' He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, 'My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.' Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, 'My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will.' Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. 'Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?' he asked Peter. 'Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.' He went away a second time and prayed, 'My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done.' When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them, and he went away again once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, 'Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come. The Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer.'" Jesus, in this moment, he has his 12 disciples with him, and some of them stay behind, and he goes with his 3 closest friends, Peter, James, and John. And he tells these 3 best friends of his, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." And he says, "Stay here and keep watch with me." He's asking them, "Hey, this is a hard moment. This is something tough in my life. Will you just be here and pray with me? Will you support me in that way?" This is what Jesus wanted his community to be like. And this is why he's so upset. Like, he comes out like, "Couldn't you guys even keep watch with me for an hour? Like, you guys couldn't stay awake and pray seriously for 1 hour? Like, that was too much to ask from my best friends." Jesus wanted his friends there for him, but instead they took a nap. Instead of being there for their friend and caring and supporting him, they gave in and did what their flesh wanted them to do. They did the easy thing. Now imagine that you are going through a hard time, and you just want some of your closest friends to be there with you, and you ask them to come over and be there with you. And none of them text you back. And then after a couple hours, you get 1 or 2 texts that just say like, "Hey, sorry I didn't come over. I took a nap." Like, that would hurt. Like, that would not be a fun, like, that'd be a moment where you're just like, "Man, I thought we were friends. I thought you cared about me." And I'm not saying that sleep isn't important. Like, trust me, I love my sleep, and I understand how important it is to make sure that we are resting properly. But what I am saying is that people, our community, that's important too. And we need to make sure that we are leaving room in our lives so that we can treat others the way that we want to be treated. We want to be able to love others in the way that we want to be loved, which means that we have to build in margin. We need to make sure that we are not neglecting ourselves, but that we have enough time to love others. Because if we want or expect others to show up and be there for us when we need them, we need to be willing to do the same thing for them. We need to be willing to show up in their moment of need as well. Margin is a super important thing. But another thing that's really difficult for a lot of us, other than building margin into our lives, is sometimes just getting over ourselves. Like, sometimes we are just so proud, or we're just too much of a people pleaser to ask for help. Sometimes we are in this moment where we need somebody, but we're not willing to reach out to anybody. We're not willing to ask them to be there with us. We don't want to appear weak, so we play this role. We become a fake version of us that we show to others. We pretend everything is okay. And in doing so, we rob our community and ourselves of the opportunity to truly grow in relationships. Like, no one can have a real relationship with a fake version of you. And if you're not willing to let people in, you're keeping everyone at arm's length away, no one's truly going to get to know you. And you're going to be constantly desiring this relationship. You'll know that there is something missing. So now let's kind of like flip this idea on its head for a second, all right? So imagine instead of you going through a tough time, your friend is. and you get a text. They're asking you just to come over and hang out. And they're like, hey, you want to come over, maybe eat some pizza, and just watch a movie or something. If you're anything like me, the second pizza's mentioned, you're like, all right, I'm in. I'll do that. I'll be there. But also, if you're anything like me, in 2 seconds, you can think of 100 excuses not to go. You can think of every reason in the world why you have other things to do, why this other stuff is just so important you can't go and be with your friend. Really, I'm just good at being selfish. I am so good at putting my needs or my wants in front of the needs of my friends and the people I care about. I can very quickly be like, no, I can't do that. I have this thing in like 3 weeks that I need to plan for. I can figure out a million ways to say no. But really what I should be working on is saying yes and being there for people. Because again, if I want people to be there for me when I am going through a tough time, I need to be willing to do the same for them. Now, ideally in this situation, Peter, James, and John, they would have stayed awake and prayed with Jesus. And they would have done it for more than just the hour that maybe Jesus was asking for or wanting. That's the kind of community that Jesus wants for us. He wants us to have that. The kind where people don't necessarily wait for the invitation. They hear that you're struggling, that you're maybe going through a hard time, and they send you a text, or they call you, they reach out to check in. Or maybe they're that friend that shows up on your doorstep with a pizza in hand and is like, hey, what movie are we watching? Like, let's hang out. I want to be here for you because I love you and I care about you. I want to help support you during this difficult time. Our communities, they help support us, and they help us to stay on track. They're such an important thing for us to have, and they're a benefit to both us and the people in them. But an important question we really need to ask ourselves is, who is my community? Or who should be my community? Like, who are the people that I should be doing life with, to use the cheesy Christian phrase? Now, I want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. Like, the kind of community that we're talking about today and that we want for ourselves is the kind of community that Jesus lived and modeled in the New Testament. We read about this kind of community. We're talking about a community that is an embodied or physical group of people that we are around. Because over the past years, there's been this rise in these online communities that have been quickly replacing in-person ones. For some people, their community, it's the other people who watch the same streamer as them. The people who like to listen to the same podcasts they do. It's the people that they like the same video games that they do, or maybe the same board games. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with these kinds of communities. However, they don't really meet this deep need that we have. They maybe address a surface level part of the issue, but they don't solve the deep desire that we have, this longing for community. These online communities, they just require so much less effort. They're so easy when compared to in-person ones because there's not a ton of conversation. Or if there is, you're frequently talking about how amazing whatever the shared interest is. Like, that's the whole conversation, is how great this one thing is, how much you love it, how, no, I'm a bigger fan than you. There aren't really awkward conversations. But if we're having a real in-person community, conversations go all over the place. If you come to my life group on a given Tuesday night, our conversations go to some weird places, all right? Like, I don't know how we got there, but hey, we're there, and it is what it is. This is the conversation we're having. Which means inevitably, topics will come up that we disagree on. There will be things that we are not fully aligned on, things that we see differently from others. And this might create some awkward moments. And this is something that was bound to happen with Jesus and his disciples too. Like, if we look at the list of people that were in Jesus' 12, we see a man called Simon the Zealot, and then there's Matthew or Levi, the tax collector. One was part of a sect of the Jewish people they were known as the Zealots, and they were known for guerrilla warfare tactics as an attempt to overthrow Rome as their oppressors. They wanted to get rid of the Romans and get back to ruling themselves. And then you have the other one who's an employee of Rome. He worked for them and would have been considered by a lot of the fellow Jews of his day to be a sellout, a traitor. Like, these two were as far apart as you can possibly get. And yet we read through the New Testament, And we don't see a single time that it comes up that these two men were fighting and they were disagreeing on things. They were trying to get the fellow disciples on their side. What we see is them following Jesus, them realizing what is the most important thing, and they're putting that thing first. They're following after Jesus and his teachings. They're willing to set aside their opinions and these other things they don't fully agree on to pursue the thing that matters most together, to stay together in community. They did the hard work in these awkward moments. You know it's really easy for all of us to do if we're dealing with an awkward moment in our lives? Can you believe what Steve said? I can't believe that. I don't think I'm going to talk to him anymore. Ooh, that thing's on sale on Amazon now. Gonna get that. Add it to the cart. Oh, okay. Well, it was good seeing you guys. Like, we all carry this little thing in our pocket, right? It's like an incredibly powerful computer. But it's also the most distracting thing in the entire world. It allows us to be anywhere in the entire world we want that's not right here with the people around us. We use our phones to distract ourselves from these awkward moments. We withdraw from the connection. We see this and we're like, I don't want to deal with that. So instead, I'm not going to. And again, we are robbing ourselves and our community of a chance to truly grow. We allow fear of awkward or uncomfortable conversations to deter us from fully committing. But that's not what we should do. We want to make sure that we are leaning in. We're doing the difficult work, that we are actually being in a real relationship with those around us. Because relationships take work. They take effort. It's something we have to continually work at. They don't just happen overnight. And so if we look at our communities and who they should be, who are the people that we should, again, be doing life with, it should absolutely include the people in our life group and our D groups, the people here at Discover that we see on a regular basis, the people that we choose to be around. But it should also include the people that we're like forced to be around. You know, people like our neighbors or our coworkers. Like, yes, you can kind of, you get some say in where you live, right? And you get some say in where you work. But you don't always get say in who they hire at your job. Or you don't necessarily get the ability to be like, no, we're not selling the house next door to those people because my friend is looking for it and I would rather them move in. Like, you don't really get to pick those things. These things are decided and they're oftentimes outside of our control. But those people should be in our communities as well. These people that we are near, the people that are around us, those are people that we should be loving as well because we see them on a daily basis. They're part of our community, whether we like it or not, whether we fully agree with them or we don't agree with them on a whole lot. It's really good and important for our communities to have these other believers, like our life group and our D group, these people who help keep us on track, these people who help encourage us, and they can help us to grow, because the way we best grow in our relationship with Jesus is in community. But it is also really important for us to have people who don't necessarily know Jesus in our community, people that we can love and show the love of Jesus to. People that we can help build up and encourage. People that can see us and see there is something different about them. And I want what they have. I want to be in that kind of community and relationship. And that's been a big focus for us here at Discover this year. We have our theme of recenter. We're trying to get back to the thing that matters most, to recenter and focus on Jesus. And in that recenter, we've been talking a lot about these 3 circles. And the first one is a very important one for us to pay attention to. It's our relationship with Jesus. But again, that's not like a solo thing. Like, yeah, you can do a lot of reading and learning about Jesus on your own. You can read the Bible and you can learn a lot. But a lot of our growth also happens in community. We grow in our relationship with Jesus when we are around other people. And the other 2 circles are like our neighborhoods, the area around us and all those people. And then the people that we know. The people that we love and we care about. These are the people that we need to make sure we're including in our community, that we are loving in the way that Jesus loved us. Now, a couple weeks ago, we had a staff retreat, and we spent a long time that day just kind of vision planning, talking about discipleship in the future. And it came up that life groups were an important thing. Go figure. But we also talked about how a lot of us on staff, we lead or we host life groups. Again, nothing that interesting. But the moment that was interesting from that conversation was that we were all willing to admit there are those days, for me it's Tuesday, where I get home and I'm like, man, I love my group. The last thing I want is to have all of them come over to my house tonight. I don't want to have to clean. I don't have to get things ready. Like, I just want to sit on my couch and watch a stupid movie and just relax. All of us admitted that we have those moments where we would rather cancel group than have it because we are just being selfish. We are just so tired or in our own heads about it. And so if you've ever felt that way, I just want to say that's okay. It happens to all of us. But a lot of us also admitted that frequently the best conversations our groups have and the most encouraging nights were the ones where we got home and we were like, man, I don't want to do this tonight, but we did it anyway. We stayed committed. We're like, you know what? I'm not going to send a text out and say, hey guys, don't come over to my house. We have people over. We hang out. We do our study, or we just spend time together eating. And those are the moments that we never regret. We never regret having our group together and being with each other. And yet we are still tempted to cancel, to not be committed. It happens to all of us. We have the solution to mankind's original problem, our deep down issue that we need to address. But if we're not willing to take it seriously, to actually commit to being in community with other people, why would the world do that? Why would anybody listen to us if we can't take our own advice? If we want to say that being in a community, in a relationship with Jesus and others is what you need, but we don't do it ourselves, why would our neighbors? Why would our coworkers? See, Jesus, he has invited each of us to be transformed, to be different, to have a relationship with him, and to have a radical commitment to our community and to love other people. But that sounds difficult. And you know what? It kind of is. Like, it is not always an easy thing. But there are some simple steps we can take because, like I said earlier, we're talking about relationships here. Those take effort. Those take time. Those take us day in and day out choosing to do it. It's not an overnight thing or like, I'm going to be committed to community now, and all of a sudden it happens. Like, you have to keep doing it, even when it'd be so much easier not to. Maybe for some of us, we just need to take the first step of figuring out, like, who is my community? Or who should my community be? Who are the people around me that I see on a daily basis? For others of us, maybe we need to do a better job of encouraging our community. We need to reach out to people, send them texts, give them a phone call, make sure that they know we care about them and love them. Maybe you need to sit down with your group and just have a real, honest conversation. Be like, guys, how do we do a better job of loving each other? How can we help each other better? You never know what's going to come out of a difficult conversation like that. Some of us need to just ask for help. You never know who in your life is going through a difficult time, but some people won't know. Some of us are so good at putting on a mask or pretending to be a fake version that people won't know we need help unless we ask them. You never know who in your life is going through a difficult time and just needs someone to be there for them. But over the next week or few weeks, I would challenge each of us to be that person. Be there for the person in your life who is in need. Even if it means just showing up, being there for them. Show them that they matter, that they are important. Show them that you love them. Love them the way that you would want them to love you if you were going through a tough time in your life. Be committed to the people in your community. Be committed to loving others the way Jesus did. Let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this day and this chance to be together as a large community, to be with others who can encourage us. And God, I pray as we get ready to leave here today, that your Spirit would speak to us, that you would bring to our hearts and our minds people that we can love, people that we can help to build up and encourage, people that we can help who are in our daily lives. God, we don't know who it is all the time, and I pray that you can help us to take those steps. Lord, we love you and we praise you for the relationship we have with you, and we thank you for your Son. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.